This might be for life. Yeah. This might be for life. Stand up when the chief is here. Hands up. Yeah, the chief is here. Stand up when the chief is here. Hands up. Yeah, the chief is here. Yeah, this might be for life.
Exactly, must be for life. Hi everyone. As everyone's attention's getting shorter and shorter, I've been told, we're going to do a hard-hitting 20-minute chat with a very interesting man, Michael Beaumont. Michael is the national chairperson for ActionSA. And Michael, the first thing I want to ask you is why today is so important from a South African electoral point of view, and for you and Herman.
Well, I mean, thanks so much, Rob, for having me. It's great to be on this platform. I think for us, particularly today, we've launched our election campaign. You know, obviously, we've been on the campaign trail for quite some time, but with the recent developments out of the Constitutional Court, our campaign was formally launched this morning, and we were very fortunate to be broadcast live on all the major TV stations. And for us, it's an important moment because we believe the most important message that needs to be shared in this campaign and beyond for South Africans is the idea that we must fix South Africa. Let's fix South Africa is our campaign. And it's made up of the concept that not only can South Africa be fixed, but we must. We must come together now to do that.
And I mean, we're not going to go through what's broken because pretty much everything is broken. Every SOE, most municipalities. Yeah. And frankly, the South Africa run by the ANC is broken. The South Africa run by the DA is surviving and ticking along. But you joined ActionSA. Tell us why and tell us how that happened.
Well, Rob, I started off in the DA. My very first job out of university, 4 days later, I was an operations manager in the North Durban constituency of the DA. I grew up in the DA. The DA was my politics right up until 2019. And, you know, I don't really celebrate it. I think it's actually very sad. So it's not something that I take any glee in or any joy. But I think the DA has undergone a transformation in a direction that I didn't agree with. You know, I think for a long time, the DA was growing and becoming an organization that, you know, was producing what South Africa wanted. And that is a real alternative, a viable alternative that could challenge the ANC and win elections. And I think in many ways, the DA has undergone a evolution back to the DP, which for me was very sad because what South Africa needs is a future without the ANC, and that was the DA's responsibility back then. So, you know, without wanting to harp on about it and, you know, feel sour about these things, South Africa doesn't have time for our emotions. We need to get on with it and produce a new alternative. And that's exactly what ActionSA has been built to accomplish for South Africa.
And tell me the fundamental differences between ActionSA and the DA.
Sure. So, I mean, I think there's a number of areas where there's a lot of overlap, but, you know, the most important one, which I think is probably the most public one at the moment anyway, is that the DA has undergone this kind of perspective back to classical liberalism in the sense that they want to adopt a position to say that race doesn't exist and race isn't real in South Africa. So aside from the fact that this is something that we obviously do not agree with, we think race does exist. I think a lot of people live under the oppressive weight of the racial legacies of our past. I think the reality is the only way you can possibly address those legacies is by identifying that they exist. They do have a pattern which is racial, and to have a problem where there's a pattern that is racial in which you're going to implement solutions that are not going to bear that in mind strikes me as a disjointed, crazy kind of affair, actually.
Actually, Musi Maimane, who's a great friend of mine, said recently at a speech he made at the Business Conference up in the Drakensberg that South African political parties are not really based on ideology. They're much more based on race and religion and things like that. And that's to me, that's a pity.
Yes, it is. And I think, you know, particularly when it comes down to the kind of challenges that South Africa is experiencing, Robin, I think the real failure of politics in South Africa, and I think it's a widespread problem, is that there's been a failure to come to the party with solutions and bring solutions to the table, because the South African people are a people who are very abused by their political system. It's an abusive relationship the South African people have with their political establishment. It really is. And rather than their political establishment returning to the table with some imagination, with some ambition, and with some solutions that could really address the problems, the political establishment has failed them. I mean, imagine this, Rob, in a world where we have the problems that South Africa does, and let's take them as read because we know what they are. We know how deep they run. How do you have 18.5 million people of voting age who would rather not vote than participate in our democratic process? The answer has to be that politics is failing the people of South Africa.
So ActionSA, DA, I think a lot of people who are not going to vote for the racist DFF, but who are completely dissatisfied with the ANC, you just think, these guys are only out to break and steal. I've given up with the ANC.
Yeah.
Not voting is probably the worst thing they can do. But how do they choose between DA and ActionSA? What's the big difference? Is it the leadership only, or is there more to it?
Yeah, I think leadership is certainly an important component, Rob. But I think from my side, the most important difference right now is that ActionSA is a party that is not in it to be an opposition. The DA has clearly made a series of decisions where it wants to play the role of opposition. And let's not for one moment take away how important the role of opposition is. Opposition is not a role that is unimportant in a South African context where there's a government that clearly needs to be held to account. Yeah. But I think the real thing that is needed in South Africa is a political party that has the creativity and the imagination and the ambition to be more than an opposition. Because I think South Africans' politics, if you look the world over, parties in opposition are there to become a government in waiting. In South Africa, we have opposition parties that are quite happy with their share of parliamentary seats. Yes, they might want to grow them here and there, but at the end of the day, they don't seem to want to aspire to put on solutions that are going to capture the imagination of our country and provide a real alternative to the ANC.
But, if you look at certain successful countries in Europe, for example, coalition government seems to be a good way forward. No one gets 50% plus, but the party gets 30% and then they team up with another party at 10 and another party at 5. They agree the mandate and off they go. Is South Africa heading in that direction? Because I cannot see the ANC ever again getting over 50% in anything.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think the rate at which the ANC is declining, Rob, is very clear. They're going to come under 50 in 2024. I mean, despite the Ramaphoria that was present at a national level in 2019, they went from 63 to 57. And I think a lot of the gloss has come off that particular idea. And the truth is that the ANC is declining more rapidly than any one single party is emerging as a new majority. And I think it's interesting because obviously being involved with Herman Mashaba's mayoralty in the city of Joburg, involved in a very complex minority coalition government that ran 7 ways. Coalitions is something of a new political project in South Africa that both the people of the country and the politicians are relatively having to get accustomed to. But the truth is, it is the future. It is going to be happening. And I would bet anything, that anyone cares to bet, that after these local government elections, going to be a whole lot more coalitions after these elections than there were in 2016 even.
Well, let's talk about the municipal elections, but let's start with the recent ruling that the elections are going ahead in October. The fact that ANC couldn't get its act together or couldn't bribe enough people, or whatever the reason, to get the candidates into certain places is neither here nor there. We're going ahead. And your prediction, and also answer the question that ActionSA is running mainly in KZN and Gauteng, which I think is very clever, but tell everyone why.
Basically, just to dive in there, Rob, ActionSA is positioned ourselves not as an opposition party. South Africa has more than enough opposition parties. In fact, I heard from IEC we're over 500 registered parties at the moment. I think the reality is, the reality is we need a party that's going to unseat failing governments. And I think ahead of 2024, people are looking for someone who's going to do that to the ANC. So it's imperative that we demonstrate this in 2021. So rather than spreading resources across 278 municipalities, as emergent political parties have done so before and failed because they produce a handful of people here and there, our view is to handpick municipalities that are strategic, that offer a prospect of removing a failing government, that offer a prospect of we can meaningfully deliver, and that we can use that as a staging platform to say that actions speak louder than words, and that we can demonstrate our successes as a growth proposition ahead of 2024, because South Africans have grown wary of broken promises, and I think this is the way to do it. We've got to show people how we're going to make things work. The municipalities we've chosen, Johannesburg, Tshwane, Ekurhuleni in Gauteng, eThekwini, Newcastle and KwaDukuza in KZN offer great prospects in that regard. But, in terms of the IEC matter, I mean, there's no question that I think the Concourt has done the country an enormous favor by guaranteeing both a registration weekend as well as the protection of regular elections. But if you'll forgive me, Rob, just to divert a little bit here, the real thing that I think we should be worried about at the moment is the IEC. I think the IEC is failing South Africa and is becoming one of those kind of organs of state that is just producing dismal results. I mean, there's a registration weekend next weekend, Rob. And I can tell you, I serve on the National Party Liaison Committee of the IEC. I can't tell you what measures they're going to put in place to make sure that people can register safely during this pandemic. How is someone living in the rural Northern Cape supposed to exercise their democratic process knowing that they can be safe? It's a real problem.
Well, let's not get on to COVID, but that's the other Brexit. Can just go on and on and on with everyone's views.
Yeah.
And Michael, just you run the ActionSA with Herman as the CEO, effectively, yes? And obviously you have to raise money to run in various constituencies. Is your selection of the constituencies a little bit also not spreading yourself too thin financially, making sure you get the impact? Is that part of the strategy?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think the reality, particularly before the Party Funding Act, is that elections in South Africa are extraordinarily expensive business. So, I mean, in 2019, a party like the ANC spent R1 billion. Now, I mean, I know those numbers will come down a bit because of quite a lot, I suppose, because of the Party Funding Act. But there's no question that if you, as an emergent political party, are spreading yourself too thin, you create the impression that you're not just new, but you're small. And the combination of new and small in South Africa is lethal. South Africans have seen a lot of new and small never accomplishes anything. So from our perspective, selecting fewer municipalities, applying resources into those areas, out-competing our competitors in those areas. And if you drive around Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni and Tshwane, you'll see more of ActionSA than you see of any other political party, quite frankly. And that's what we want to make sure that we get right in this campaign.
Okay, so I haven't yet seen an ActionSA poster because I live in a DA province, DA city, DA area. What's the message?
Yeah, so I mean, the registration posters we put up in the beginning of the campaign had this beautiful emblazoned term saying, "Gatvol, register to vote." And there we want to talk to South Africans who are gatvol. I mean, we're gatvol of crime, we're gatvol of COVID, we're gatvol of unemployment, of corruption. We're gatvol of being gatvol, basically. And there's a huge market of people out there, particularly young South Africans, who we wanted to encourage in the registration process and are working very hard to do so in the run-up ahead of next weekend's registration. But I think from the election campaign point of view, we want to run a very positive and hopeful campaign. We don't want to tell South Africans what they know. I think South African politics has become a lot about political analysis. We're going to tell people what they already know. Our approach as an organization is going to be to deliver hope. We want people to believe in this idea that South Africa can be fixed, and we want to deliver their belief in the fact that ActionSA is the vehicle that's going to do it.
Very interesting indeed. And Michael, you're a KZN boy, born a banana boy from Durban.
Yes, brought up in Durban, a proud supporter of the Sharks rugby team, brought up that way, and like you, attended Michaelhouse, which was obviously some very, very fond years in my life. But after that, certainly been around in different parts of the country as well.
So which house were you in and which year?
I matriculated in 2003 in Founders House. I'm very glad a proud graduate of Founders House.
So funnily enough, we've got Hersov, Herberts, Llewellyn Palmers and Taylors, 4 branches of our family that went to Michaelhouse, and either Founders or Pasco. So there we go.
Oh, really? Okay.
I went to Michaelhouse for the first time since I left in the late 1970s. Last week on my way up to the Drakensberg, and I must say, spectacular.
Yeah, no, it is. Every time I'm an avid trout fisherman, so I see the area quite a lot whenever I get the chance to go fishing. That is, and whenever you drive past it, it's so impressive. I also am glad to hear that I'm not the only one who doesn't return regularly, because I do feel very guilty. I don't do it as often as I should, but it is a beautiful place.
Do you know the interesting? The gates are in a different place to when they were when I was there. And I came through the new gate towards Meadows, which is the main rugby field, and I saw football goals everywhere. We didn't play football in my day. I thought, are those rather large hockey goals? They're football goals. So anyway.
My goodness, I can feel some people turning in their graves if they're putting up soccer goals on Meadows. My goodness.
Yeah.
I suppose things must change.
You finished Michaelhouse, and what did you do straight away?
Straight to Rhodes University. Did ended up doing an honors degree in politics and environmental science. To be honest with you, I thought politics was more of an interest and a hobby and a thing that I would engage myself during a vacation, but it turned out that I had been bitten by a political bug and I wasn't able to ever leave.
That was it. Always been in politics.
Yeah, literally, it's all I've ever done. I mean, I started my first job, as I said, 3 or 4 days after my last exam at Rhodes University, and it's literally all I've ever done since. But, I think one thing I will say, because I spent a great deal of time in party politics, and I was very fortunate to spend 3 years in the City of Johannesburg working with Herman. And it's one of the reasons why I fundamentally want to put across the view that at the end of the day, I've been in opposition, I've been in government. You can do more in government in a day than you can do in 10 years in opposition. There's a lot of people in opposition. We really need people in government who are going to make a difference.
I've heard that if you survey South Africans, their 3 biggest priorities or biggest concerns are jobs, jobs, and jobs. So all this other stuff that the ANC throws at everybody, they never mention economic growth. They don't even know how to do it. Haven't a clue. So no wonder we've got the highest unemployment rate in the world. That's the only thing the ANC has achieved. Highest unemployment rate in the world. What a joke.
No, it is. And I mean, it's the absolute tragedy that's taken place. And when you've been in government, you realize very quickly that nearly everything you're dealing with is solved by having fewer people who need government. Because actually, that's where the solution lies in life. We need fewer people who rely on public health care because they can afford private medical aid. We need fewer people relying on public transport because they can afford vehicles, and so on. I mean, in South Africa, it's bizarre. We have this dynamic where we celebrate social grants. We should cry when we have to have more social grants added in our country. It should be a national tragedy that people have to rely on the state. But this is the kind of situation that the ANC has created. And you can't help but see that there's a perverse dependency that the ANC seems to foster in that particular regard, which I think is the real tragedy there, because, South Africans are enterprising people. And I think that enterprising nature is being blunted by the ANC.
I made a speech up at the Business Conference in Drakensberg last week. And I basically said, South Africa is not investable for foreigners. It's not investable. If I was someone if I was a Martian on Mars with a pile of money and I had to allocate a portfolio to the globe, what percentage would I put into Africa? What percentage into South Africa? Well, I would allocate a percentage to Africa, but I probably put 0 in South Africa. Why? Expropriation without compensation, overly regulated, all the SOEs are broken. And anyway, they weren't, under the ANC, there weren't SOEs, there were employment agencies. On and on and on. I mean, it's just desperate. So we need to make South Africa investable again, but it's never going to happen under the ANC. So can you and Herman, and I do like the DA, can you and Herman, the DA, Musi, FF Plus, get your acts together, win, get in a coalition and fix this country, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the point is that, and I mean, I'll offer the following, Rob, because, it's often very easy to get negative about South Africa and get depressed about the national situation. But I always say to people, consider the following. How little would it take to start to turn around confidence in South Africa? I mean, government has made that bar so incredibly low that actually you wouldn't have to do very much. Can you imagine someone came into the NPA and said, give me your highest profile case of corruption that's ready to go. I'm going to prosecute myself, this one live on television, to send out a message. Now, this is what we need. We need symbols of change that can, echo through our country and be a kind of beacon on the hill to the world to say that South Africa is changing. And even though we know it's going to take years and years and years for that change to reach the levels that it should, just those initial symbols will get us to start believing again as a country. And I think that's the important part we need to get back to.
Technology is going to make a huge difference. When everybody has a smartphone in their hands, connected to the best fiber or back-end infrastructure, and it's just around the corner, we will see fintech solutions, education technology solutions, health solutions, regulation technology solutions that will absolutely leapfrog governments. Yep. Or go around them. And it's the young people who are going to do that. So old governments are in trouble. Now, quick thing. This Saturday, I'm doing a fireside chat with the recently elected president of Zambia, HH. And Musi said something really interesting the other day. I've quoted Musi a lot. He said that decolonization of Africa was north to south. So Kenya, Tanzania, then Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, South Africa. And bad governments have been in place in almost all those countries. But what's happening now is Malawi has a great president, Lazarus. Zambia has the best you could ask for in HH. Kagame is fantastic. It's coming south. It's coming to your neighborhood. And in 2023, Zimbabwe has elected. I'm hoping Nelson Chamisa gets elected. And in 2024, it's you guys, the DA, and the non-EFF ANC team's turn, I reckon.
Yeah, there's no question. I think we need to start getting more and more people working together. And I think in many ways, we need to start getting political organizations putting aside differences, doing what the South African people actually want, which is creating a kind of united front, so to speak, that's going to take on the ANC and create a public feeling in South Africa that change can actually happen in 2024.
Michael, I'm proud of you for what you do. Herman is a terrific guy. Please send him our, we're big fans of his. And please help us get the South Africa we want and get the government we want. We've waited a long time.
Yeah, South Africans deserve a hell of a lot better than they're getting right now. And I think we need to start creating a movement in South Africa where we can start to really realize a country and create belief in a country again, which is so important.
Last comment on behalf of ActionSA.
Well, I think, Rob, from our side, there's an election in just over 7 weeks. The reality is that, elections are going to be, forged by political parties that are able to get their message across. We're very grateful for the enormous support that we've experienced in a very short space of time. And if there are people out there who would like to get behind ActionSA and help support us and help us reach more South Africans, because that's the critical thing. When you're an organization that's 1 year old, you're having to do battle with individuals who need to know more about you. The critical thing we're seeing is that the people we are talking to are converting to ActionSA more readily than any other party. And that's the measurement of success. So if there are people out there who would like to get involved in ActionSA and support us and help us reach more people, we really would appreciate that. Because at the end of the day, we've got to take a message of let's fix South Africa to every doorstep in South Africa.
Michael, it's been fantastic. Let's fix South Africa, and thank you for everything you're doing on behalf of all of us.
Thank you very much, Rob.
Go for it. Lauren?